Hey guys, so it's actually finally sunny. We've had 40 consecutive days of rain. It's probably been one of the most depressing time periods in existence. I thought I was going crazy. I was like, it feels like it's rained every single day, and it had. So I googled it and it had. So today I'm going to talk about my thoughts on medication, which I think is quite an important thing to talk about because I've been sitting in my room thinking about all the videos I've made and thinking about how it could give people the wrong idea in terms of the condition being curable or the symptoms being treatable without medication. And I just wanted to clarify something. I think that medication is 100% the best thing that we have in the current reality that we live in and the current framework of social existence, if you like. And the reason for that being is the costs of having an episode with the legal system that we have, with the social understanding that we have, with the stigma that we have, is and also just for the individual understanding, is way too severe. And so I have been through an unbelievable amount of stress, agony, homelessness on the streets, living in strange conditions, poor housing situations, losing so many jobs, all because I was never on medication for any of my symptoms over the years. And I am just incredibly lucky. I don't think I have honestly no idea, looking back on some of the situations I was in. I was just unbelievably lucky that I didn't get in trouble, 1, get put in prison, 2, hurt myself severely. I'm very, 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 very lucky, especially because I never told anyone what was going on with me. The YouTube videos is the first I ever spoke about anything that was going on. And if I could go back in time, I would take medication and endure the initial difficulty in trying to find the right ones, right? Because when I first went and got help, and yes, the psychiatrist was very mean to me, and the CBT therapist was very dismissive, and that didn't add to the experience and betrayed me in a way. I would go back in time and endure trying to find the right medication because I got akathisia, which was a really extreme symptom. And then when I did say that to my psychiatrist, he was like, well, have you thought about getting a girlfriend? And I've been feeling a lot of anger about that lately, just thinking about how ridiculous it is for someone in psychiatry to say that to someone like myself, who was at the time saying I'm hearing things and seeing things and stuff, and that was just completely unemotional. But nonetheless, knowing all that I know now, I would go back and I would get my medication right. So I know there's promising ones now like Cobenfy and things that apparently don't have as many of the negative symptoms. And then what I would do is I would try to learn all the things I've learned now, so all this insight, because once you've gone through a psychotic episode, once you've experienced psychosis for a couple of years unmedicated, which most people have, because a lot of people persist before they are eventually there's an intervention, in those times you still have all the experiences. You can still critically analyse those experiences and go over them and go, right, what went wrong here, what was I doing here, what was I thinking during this, and try to bring those thoughts to mind and then gain the insight. So I would be on the medication and I would gain the insight that I have now by going over those events and moments and then learning the mechanism. So for example, what I think will be the future treatment and lead to higher cures is for safety, first and foremost, to make sure you're in a safe environment that's not, adding epigenetic modifiers through stress and all this stuff. Good diet, so you fix everything you possibly can and you habituate that stuff. Most people don't realise the power of habits, And so I would habituate all my good behaviours and make sure that I'm in a safe place. And then what I would probably do is I would start education. And education, this is what I'm trying to provide because it doesn't really exist at the moment. There's a lot of hocus pocus stuff out there and there's a lot of confusion about symptoms and there's a lot of extreme stories. I remember 8 years ago I read about someone who was seeing something very scary persistently, and not to their discredit, but it was very over amplified because the people around them were like, oh my god, that's terrifying, and they were like amplifying this experience. So what I think is that in that settled stage, when you've got the right medication, when you're at peace, and you can start playing video games again, and maybe you've got a little bit of anhedonia, but you're stable, that's when you start to gain all this education. And the education I'm hoping to provide is like breaking down hallucinations, breaking down thought processes, automatic thoughts, thought patterning, involuntary patterning, things that I'm coming up with that create these delusional mechanisms. Also where paranoia arises from, a wider reality framework to fit into, something that provides stability. And then learning all that stuff while on medication would allow you then to speak to your psychiatrist or doctor and say, I've learned all of this stuff, I've gone through the hallucinations, I've gone through the paranoia, I think I understand and have great insight into these symptoms and how my own behaviour and my environment stimulates that, and what I have to do to counteract those epigenetic effects. So what I would like to do is reduce my medication. And that's what I think the future would be. I think the future would be getting the meds right to prevent any kind of danger or risk to the person suffering. And then strict education and habitual reform. So learning what makes you unwell and what helps you grow and develop and habitually adapt. And also, like a dynamic model for mental health. So understanding that even if you've had brain scans and there's atrophy in certain areas of the brain, thanks to new research, we know that these areas have an incredible ability to regenerate and even recover brain density and cortical thickness, is then learning about certain things that grow those certain areas. So social cortex, those parts of the brain that are responsible in social functioning. You've got to go out and you've got to push yourself a little bit socially, and maybe do crossword puzzles to try and increase the cortical thickness. So that education growth phase when you're on medication is to try and do all the things and habitualize the stuff that will support a healthy brain. And then it's to try and finally reduce the medication so that you can kind of get the symptoms back. I think that's what it would be. I think that's what the end result would be, is that the person would have to kind of have the symptoms come back but be able to positively challenge them, and that would just be so risky to do. That's why it always have to be with a doctor and all this stuff. But that's what I think the future recovery would look like for people with psychosis and schizophrenia. The thing that I get most annoyed with today is the over-reliance upon medication. And so many people are just given medication because, one, they're told that things are genetic, right? So they're told this is a genetic disease, you're effectively powerless to change it. And so the person then stays on the medication for like 40, 50 years. Luckily, we're not doing lobotomies anymore, so these medications, they aren't anywhere near how bad those things used to be, and they've come a long way, and in a sense they are modern miracles because they're allowing us time to figure out our understanding of all this stuff and then properly reorganize our social behaviors and individual behaviors to be able to accommodate healthier living. Because there's a lot of understanding, I think, that's lost about the individual and our own minds that leads to these very extreme cases. And it does annoy me how people aren't, like, as a psychiatrist, those people are educated, I think, to recognise symptoms and then treat based on the literature of what's best for those symptoms or label condition, but not necessarily to deal with the nuance of the person. So, their story, their trauma, their background, all this stuff. Because as someone that had pretty extreme trauma in my childhood, when I went to the psychiatrist for the first time, it was almost like I wasn't a human, I was a happening. Does that make sense? I was something happening that was disorganised, and they needed to figure out what the best intervention of treatment that was. And so instead of asking me, like, what's things been like for you, or what was it like at home, it was very kind of current. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It was kind of like seeing me as something happening within the moment but not attached to any story in the past. And I think that the way that people are just abandoned on medication is what creates this negative association for people with medication like myself. And I think that's what scared me the most, because I I was terrified of going to the doctors, getting a schizophrenia diagnosis or whatever, and then them basically saying, look, you've got to take this medication, otherwise, this is going to happen. Because that happened the first time I went to the hospital. The second time I went to the hospital, when I truly did try to seek help properly, and I wasn't just in a crisis, they said, well, if you don't come back, we're going to get the police to come to your door and they'll have to bring you back to the hospital. And I just thought that's just such a horrible thing to tell someone, because I'd said it so politely. I was like, I think I've changed my mind, I don't really want to come back. And they're like, unfortunately you've got to. And I was like, well, what happens if I don't? And they were like, well, the police are coming and all this stuff. So yeah, it's quite extreme. And I was always very, very scared, because I associated medication with effectively lifelong. That's what I saw it as. I saw it as a sentence in a way. But the positive association with medication is that medication allows you the time and the space and stability, most importantly, which is something that I missed out on, and I've done irreparable damage to my body and my life, I think, and missed out on so many of my good years because I wasn't stable. The positive face of medication is you get stability, mental stability and clarity, where you can learn, but you have to learn about what's going on with you and really insightfully try to gain understanding of what happened to you. I feel like people aren't supported to do that process. This kind of just put on medication and forgot about, whereas if they were put on medication and then rigorously put through these exercises to help them, encourage them and develop a good strong sense of self, then we might see lower need for long-term medication. Because I don't see anything wrong with medication, I think it's a modern miracle. But what I do see wrong is long-term medication for things that I think have explanations and could have better outcomes for people. And also, this is just something that I want to say, is to look up the side effects. So if you are going to go on medication for the first time, or you're going to, talk to your doctor about different medications, look up the side effects and be cautious of them, because I almost got into a very severe situation because the psychiatrist that I had, makes sense because of how rude he was, he wasn't very competent, didn't tell me about the side effects. At least I don't remember that conversation. He didn't put it forwards that I need to watch out for things. And so I got akathisia, and if anyone's ever had that, it was the worst experience of my life, and it's almost traumatized me because I think about how I felt in that experience all the time. I couldn't sit down, I couldn't stand up, all I could do was walk around, so I would pace in my room, and this went on for 2 weeks because that's how long my appointment was. And when I say that the only thing I could do was to be in a mummy position, like this is how I would go to sleep. I would get into a mummy position and I'd feel like my body was on fire, like so much. Seriously, it feels so ridiculous saying it. Like the 2 weeks were just blanked out, apart from me going up to someone in the local area that I knew and saying to him, like, I don't know what's going on with me, but I can't sit down and stand up. And I was like sitting down and standing up as I was trying to speak to him. And then, when I went back and I told them about that, they were like, oh, okay, we'll stop taking this medication. And then what they did is they tried to take me into the back room to give me an injection. And that's when I said no to the injection, and I came out and I said to him, like, I don't think I want to, go through these medications anymore. And I'm pretty sure that's when he said, if you thought about getting a girlfriend. Yeah, it's a crazy experience. But I mean, that's why I never went on medication after that, because I just formed such a negative association with them that I thought, oh, well, F these people, I'm going to do this myself. And then, years of hardship, which probably could have been circumvented through good education, looking up symptoms and side effects. Because if I'd have known that was a side effect, because I was so stressed at that time and I was hearing things, going through things, I think like a week before I went there, I was chasing voices around a local area, thinking that someone was actually shouting outside my window. There wasn't. And so I was really disorganized and all over the place back then. And so when I got this symptom, I just thought it was, this is a new experience now, because that's what I was used to, because I'd already been suffering for 4 years before this. And so when anomalies happened like that, it was just a new thing that I needed to confront, so I would just endure it. And you look at people with schizophrenia, and the research behind that it supports how they get themselves into very difficult situations because they're less likely to report difficulties they have or medical issues and things, because I think that they're just so used to enduring this stuff. But yeah, make sure to look up symptoms, make sure to look at side effects, and do your proper research into the type of medication you're going to be taking, and then talk to your doctor about it. And my advice as well is, if you don't feel that you've got a good psychiatrist or doctor, ask for another one, because that's what I should have done, really. But hey ho, I suppose I'm here now and I've got all this knowledge, so it wasn't too bad in the end. It worked out, although there's a few times I probably could have not been here. But yeah, have a great day.